So welcome everyone again to the EQ journey. This is session 2. Tonight we will be heading down the pathway of getting a greater understanding of emotional intelligence and where it shows up in our personal, professional lives and such, academic lives. Formatting will be very much like what we experienced last night. And there'll be times where we'll have you in breakout rooms to discuss with some of your fellow students, as well as there'll be times where we'll just work as a group as a whole. And then, of course, with Jeff and I, there's always potentially a surprise somewhere just for the fun of it. You're going to keep me honest on that, Jeff.
Well, we usually don't even know. That's why it's a surprise.
Yes, the embrace of improvisation is a good thing. So with that, I am going to begin to share my screen, and then we'll go ahead and we will get started. Jeff, I think I may have cut you off. Were you getting ready to say something?
Nothing important.
All right. Well, if it comes back to you, we'll make it work. All right. So last night we had a really good session, I think, in as much as that there was some good content, hopefully very relatable, very actionable on your part. I would remind you tonight of a couple of things that kind of leap out. First and foremost, this is a psychologically safe environment and place. You can feel free to share as much or as little as you care to. You should not feel the pressure to go any further than that. And we put you in a place where we don't demand of you anything that you don't feel comfortable sharing. The other part about this tonight, as you probably picked up from last night, we're very big believers in curiosity and not judgment. Curiosity is a pathway to learning. It's a pathway to getting to breakthroughs. Judgment typically shuts things down pretty quickly. And what's ironic about that is that we come to those conclusions fast with very little information. Curiosity builds on that information so that we can really discover and really learn where we want to go and what we want to accomplish. So let's talk a little bit about where we've been. Last night, we began by talking about emotions and about what they truly are versus maybe how they potentially have been misdefined or mischaracterized over time. We talked about how sometimes those definitions came from maybe a parent or a teacher from many, many years ago. We did that primarily, guys, just to kind of reacquaint for some, and if not, open the eyes of others that emotions are chemicals in your brain, and they've been put there for your benefit. They're what we call many times neurotransmitters. They're communication devices, if you will. We also talked about some of the messaging that can come from those emotions, as well as Jeff. Jeff did a wonderful job at explaining what EQ is not, as well as the true definition around it. And in many ways, and I think Jeff may have said this last night as well, is that it's really about being smarter with feelings. You know, management of what we think and what we feel so that when we make a decision, it's optimal in nature. And the better we are at making decisions, the better our outcomes, the better our performance. Then we moved into talking about the idea of success and the role that emotional intelligence plays in that and how it impacts that. We talked about success factors, those 4 areas of effectiveness, relationships, well-being, and quality of life. And then we moved through to talking about how emotions drive people and the importance of remembering that truth. They drive me, they drive you, they drive the people that you work with, live with, go to school with. And again, the better that we're able to understand these things, the better we're going to be at in our relationships and in our work in general. So once again, there's that definition. It's effectively blending thinking and feeling to make optimal decisions. And tonight, we're going to begin with looking at, it's a competency inside of our emotional intelligence model that we use in our training work. and it's called Recognize Patterns. And Recognize Patterns is very important in as much as I typically use the sports analogy. So whether you are familiar or if you're into football or basketball, and even if you're not, you probably have heard of the term game film. Well, game film is designed to help an opponent understand what their opposing team is going to do in particular situations. It's also designed for that team to kind of evaluate what it is that they do so that they can better understand how to improve and get better. That's kind of what recognized patterns are. It's a blend of the inside work, what's going on inside of me, what are my patterns? And then once we get strong in that regard, we can begin to look at the patterns of others. And we've all seen that, right? And great example for you might be, there's a certain way that you handle yourself when you have a paper to turn into Dr. Mahmood. You have a certain way of approaching that. The question is, do you know what that pattern is? Do you find yourself nervous or anxious? Or do you find yourself excited and enthusiastic? And the same thing can go for the other person again. Potentially, you might be able to recognize a pattern in a loved one. If someone that you care about is not getting what they want or need, they may behave in a certain way. The idea is for us to get into this mode of where we are paying attention.
Eric?
Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
The thing that's important to remember when you're looking at recognizing patterns in others is you're not there to change their pattern. You're there to learn what it is and then figure out the best way to make them comfortable with their pattern. If you know somebody does not like getting a work assignment on Friday and fret about it all weekend, you wouldn't do that. So you would tell them on Monday morning. So just you're not trying to change them.
And anyway, as you probably all know, one of the most futile attempts of all life is to change somebody. All of us probably have stories of where we tried it and failed miserably. So with that, I'd like you guys to look at the image on my screen, and I'd like you to kind of process that a little bit. And then if you could type in the chat, and I'll ask Jeff once again to monitor, what is it you think that is? What are you seeing there? So I'll give you a minute. I'll give them a minute. I'll let you guys kind of process and begin to type in. And Jeff, maybe if you can give 5 or 7 responses, and then we'll keep moving.
We've got 4 umbrellas.
4 umbrellas.
5 umbrellas. Circus tent.
Circus tent.
Some more umbrellas. A swing carousel.
Okay.
Glass flower.
How about one more?
I'm waiting. A painting.
A painting. So one of the things that you should be mindful of is that the person who said it's a painting versus the person who said it's an umbrella, maybe that is what it is for you. Maybe your pattern is an umbrella. Maybe another person's pattern is a painting. It's important for us to understand our own. And again, as we grow, it becomes important for us to understand the other person's. You can imagine what it would be like if you try to transfer your view, your perspective of it being a painting when they see it as an umbrella. There's a great deal of motivation here for understanding. We're going to look at a film clip. And this is an exercise that I've done many times over the years, and I think it's fascinating. And it's a clip from a movie called Ronin. You may or may not have seen this. Doesn't matter if you haven't. But what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to pay real close attention. I'd like you to pick one of the characters in this particular scene, and I want you to pay attention and see what kind of patterns you might recognize. And certainly from an emotion standpoint, okay, there is no right or wrong answers here. It's just your perspective and your observation. So I want you to pick one of the characters in the scene, and I want you to follow them, pay attention to them, take notes if you need to. And again, what kind of patterns do you recognize? Again, emotions, something else. It could be body language, whatever you like. But the idea is paying attention and looking for patterns, good data. And then when we're completed here, we'll come back together and talk a little bit about it. So let's take a look.
I have the information. We'll be moving very soon. It'll definitely be in the nature of an ambush, somewhere between here and here. We'll anticipate a 3-car convoy with a backup team. And obviously, we will try and stop the target before they can get away from us.
What's in the case?
That information isn't
Is
necessary.
it heavy? Is it explosive? Is it chained to some unlucky bloke's wrist? We're gonna have to chop it off?
All
What
right.
is it?
But I am not under any obligation to let you know.
If you are not, then the price has got to go up. I'll get you the case, but the price has got to go up. If it's gonna be amateur night, I want $100,000. I want it up front. I want it in a bank account. I want another 100,000 when you get the case. Okay. We've got shooters here. Shooters here. I'll tell you an old trick. Hey. Shut up. Draw it again. Draw it again. You're the ace field, man. Draw it again. It's a simple diagram. Just draw it again. Draw what you saw. Draw it again. Draw it again. Two shooters. Car comes through here. Shooters across from each other. Kill each other dead. Oh my, where'd you learn that? Huh? In a regiment. What regiment was that? The 22nd Special Air Service. What's the color of the boathouse at Hereford? What's the color of the boathouse at Hereford? I don't like your attitude. The color of the boathouse. Oh, fuck off! Right, son, I'm on. Do something. Go ahead, do something. Do something. About an ambush? Tell me about an ambush? I ambushed you with a cup of coffee.
You'll get your money when we get the case.
The others too.
That is what I understood. Come on, we've gotten the word. We're moving.
All right. So a little bit of pause. So what I'd like you to do, whether you feel comfortable going verbal or you can certainly type it in the chat. What are a few observations based on the character that you selected to observe? And what did you see? And for those of you who need some time to process, I'm going to give you that. But if anybody has something immediately that came to mind, please feel free to unmute or type in the chat.
I was taking notes while I was watching, and I noticed the character Robert De Niro, that he would ask questions and he was direct. He was negotiating, bargaining, calling bluffs. I noticed that he really tried to stay relaxed because he noticed that the lady had to call. And I was like, well, you know, negotiating stuff like that, usually when you do wait like that, it's a guarantee sometimes, because you know, I've experienced it before. So I don't know, I like that. That was a part I did like, the calling the bluff part.
Mm.
And but he did get a little intimidating against the other person. So that was a little much, but I noticed he wants to be in control. So
Mm.
that was my observation.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. I love it. And one of the things I would mention to you and to the group, imagine if we paid that kind of attention to ourselves, to our emotions, when we're in tense situations or light situations, serious, sad, whatever the circumstance may be. The more data you have, the better you have an understanding. And you did a wonderful job at looking at Robert De Niro's character. So thank you very much. Jeff, anything from the chat that you wanted to throw out?
Okay, I focused on the guy just sitting at the table. He seemed pretty indifferent to the events that unfolded, like he'd seen the show before.
Hmm.
Extreme logical intelligence versus extreme emotional intelligence. Logical intelligence is the only element that has any business in a situation like this. Looking at the person requesting the case, closed off, hands crossed, made self physically smaller, but clearly in the know of what needed to be accomplished.
Hmm.
This is a second part of the extreme logic. Conversely, if De Niro had to give a 13-year-old a talk about sex or death, he wouldn't fare nearly as well. I like that. Fitting what's going on to what's going on. There was a couple characters that simply didn't do anything, even when it escalated, as if they shut down to the interaction that was near them.
All right, I'm going to pause you there for a minute, Jeff. Anybody else would like to go verbal? Observations? All right. So one of the things that I wanted to mention to you guys from that was the idea of, if you notice the young lady that was kind of the, I guess, ringleader, if I could say it that way, the expression on her face when Robert De Niro's character said that it was going to cost more and they wanted it up front, and how her eyes changed and her face dropped a bit. Now, that doesn't make me some expert at reading people. And this does not happen overnight, as we talked about last night. This requires work. But if you're willing to work on this idea of, let me understand what's going on. Let me pay attention to what I'm feeling. What is the emotion that is going on? Again, whether it's when I'm in a meeting with my boss or when it is before an exam, whatever it may be, you build that skill up, it will serve you well. Because as I know, you know, in the world that you run, good, reliable data is everything. So why not have that on ourselves? All right, any other observations or questions? Or Jeff, is there anything else from the chat that you'd want to?
There's a couple.
All right.
George or Gregor remained silent and analyzed the whole station, staying calm to gauge other people's patterns, and did not truly react until after there was a threat of violence. And you could see in his eyes he was getting ready to act, depending on what Sam would do next. Guy at the table with glasses seemed a bit nervous, but very observant, ready to react. You can also see the scales of who responds respect and authority shift in a matter of seconds. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So I have a few questions for you guys to consider in your breakout rooms. And Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen and let you kind of pull them. And you're going to go into rooms just like we did last night. and we're going to process these questions. So when you look at it, how could recognizing patterns help you be a better student? You can look at the second question there based on what you saw in the video. How could recognizing patterns help you know yourself better? And then what challenges you most in recognizing patterns? And again, the concept of recognizing patterns is potentially it's new to you. Don't feel like you've got to get this one like exactly right. Just kind of think of it in terms of what you saw and what we've been discussing. Maybe you've been really, really busy in the last year and you just really haven't taken the time to slow down to recognize your patterns. But that doesn't mean that you can't have an understanding and can see maybe a pathway to begin to do that more. So Jeff, if you've got those already, I'll go ahead and come out of the share and we can get them into rooms. That work?
That'll work. And the questions are in the chat.
All right. So we'll give you guys, let's say about 7 to 10 minutes or so. And then we'll come back and we'll ask you to share some of your observations.
All righty.
Jeff,
Welcome back, everyone. And here's hoping that your discussions were lively and thought-provoking. So as we did last night, just a few people that might want to share verbally about what they learned most in their breakout rooms. And then obviously, we'd like to hear from you in the chat as well. If you'd like to jot some observations, maybe 1 or 2 things. And if you want to volunteer for verbal, just go ahead and unmute yourself and you can fire away, and chat is also open to you.
in the group that
We
You gonna try to feed her or?
no, she's not been swallowing.
Okay. So, you want to just try to do liquid or?
Somebody needs to mute,
Yeah,
please.
she did. She did.
Okay.
mute.
Okay.
in our group that I was a part of, we talked about how getting in a good homework habit of doing your homework proactively instead of waiting till last day or last couple of days when assignments due, and then also having a set habit and a set environment where you do your homework in can help you be more productive.
Okay.
And then as far as the second question, we talked about understanding that our habits are habitual and that, you do them without thinking, and small things can add up overall, in the long run of doing your small habits each and every day. And then what challenges you most in recognizing patterns, we talked about how usually you don't reevaluate your patterns until something has gone wrong.
Yeah.
And even when you do reevaluate them, you can convince yourself that maybe that you can fool yourself,
Yeah.
That's what we talked about.
Well, Ethan, that's great. And what I would remind you and everyone else, there's always going to be an emotion or emotions that are connected to those particular things. And if we can slow down enough to kind of probe a little bit as to what those emotions might be telling us, we can get some greater data to make the changes that we need to make those better decisions. So as you think about it, in the case of putting things off to the last moment, that typically creates a level of anxiousness, right? That'd be one emotion potentially. So what is anxiousness telling us? What is that pattern communicating to us? It's probably telling you, hey, this is not good. It doesn't feel healthy. And that's a cue for you and I to, again, maybe look at what is this pattern? What's going on here? So that you can make a change so that, as you were alluding to, Ethan, you're choosing a different way of approaching homework. All right, Jeff, anything from the chat you want to throw out?
Yeah. This person is, I think we're brothers that don't know it. Knowing my patterns help me most with my mental health. I notice when I'm feeling down, there are things I start doing: procrastinate, watch more TV, or stop doing tasks around the house, exercising. When I notice that, I work to force myself to do things that make me feel better: going outside to do yard work, walking the dog, taking times to do activities with my children. Recognizing the pattern of depression and making small changes has helped tremendously for my mental health. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's great. And then maybe we'll go back to the verbal. Would anyone else like to share, unmute for the group?
I got something, Eric. So we were talking in our group, and I have the ability where I actually have, from not only from a student standpoint, because I work at a college and I have students of my own that that I help instruct and stuff. And what I've actually noticed is I've had to adjust my patterns with instructing and helping out with my students, because by the book, if we were to just go off of what the school wants us to do, like, yeah, teach this, have them do that, well, it doesn't always work that way. So I've learned that I've had to actually read the patterns of my students and see, you know, who's a better hands-on learner, who is a visual learner, who is a person that needs to see a PowerPoint or needs me to start the project for them to understand how to do something. So I've had to, you know, adjust from that. And I've noticed that within the past 2 years I've worked there, that in order for me to get across to my students and for them to get as successful as they are through the program, I need to learn what each one of their patterns are, and then I can adapt my teaching pattern to it and help them get through as best as I possibly can.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Jeff, I'll let you go back to the chat and then we can keep moving.
There's no more in the chat.
All right. So as we get ready to move to another area, specifically a competency in our model, I would just remind you again, the recognizing of patterns, it works best when it's an oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah.
hi, Eric. Sorry, I just was trying to talk to you on it, but I forgot to unmute.
All right, no worries. Go ahead.
This might be a more selfish question for myself, because I'm kind of dealing with this right now. But like one of my challenges is in recognizing patterns is maybe not recognizing my pattern, but helping others recognize theirs. That their pattern has been harmful to, let's say, a group dynamic that has been highly functional. It's basically my team now. We had an addition of another person that's been kind of think they're greasing the wheels, let's say, but they're actually throwing a wrench kind of in the smooth sailing of how everything was going. And I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional, but I was wondering if there's a unique way for me to help them realize their pattern without me, like, let's say, in like an aggressive manner that I'm trying to tell them that they're a certain way.
Yeah. That's a great question, and not selfish at all, because I think all of us, a good majority of us have been in positions or situations where those kind of things with the group. One of the things that I always say, especially when you're operating with not a lot of data to really know exactly, is to ask powerful, open-ended questions. And before the question, I always believe it's important to validate the other person. And validate could be as simple as, hey, Jeff, I really appreciate all of the hard work that you put in when we do a session. Then I can ask him, hey, Jeff, tell me, when you are in this situation, what typically is your decision-making grid? I started by letting Jeff know he's good, he's solid. Then I moved to probing, and an open-ended question, powerful, and build and build and build. Maybe Jeff will tell me, well, man, Eric, whenever I have to monitor the chat, I get really, really nervous and I tend to like withdraw. Oh, I didn't know that. Then maybe I've got data that tells me I can now pinpoint the problem. It's nervousness, it's anxiety, it's anxiousness, versus it being, well, yeah, I just want to screw things up because I don't like you. You know what I mean?
We've gotten past that.
Yeah, we've grown a lot in the in the years we've been together. Hopefully that helps you. So as we are getting ready to move into the next section of our session, we're going to talk about emotional literacy. Recognizing patterns, again, starts with an inside look, and you work on the growth there. As that growth begins to blossom, you begin to apply that in other situations. We heard that from some of your of the participants tonight. And I can tell you, it will reward you in taking that sort of pace and that kind of process. So as I move now to share, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that next one. Emotional literacy. So most, if not all of you guys, I know are involved in some levels of technology. So when you hear someone, I remember this term, that person's computer literate, right? I would think that means that they know how to turn on a computer. They know how to operate inside of a Windows environment or an OS environment or Android or iOS or what have you, right? So when you see the term emotional literacy, what do you think that means? So if you would, go ahead and type in the chat, maybe some thoughts of what you think emotional literacy means. And Jeff, whenever you're ready, go ahead and start.
Okay, I'm waiting. How to speak the language of feelings. I like that. We'll have to remember that one.
Yeah, that's good.
Someone who understands and can control their emotions while recognizing others. A grounded understanding of your own emotion and what drives them. Being able to read and understand emotions. You can literally read people's emotions to some extent. They are able to understand and communicate their emotions. I think the communicate part is important because you might need to tell somebody how you're feeling.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the reference around technology, and I know just enough to be dangerous. So you'll give me some grace. So if you guys were looking for someone who is Ruby on Rails literate, what would be some of the things you'd be looking for to know that? And just if I can get a couple people, if you want to unmute, give me an answer. What would that be?
Well, read, write, understand.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Oh, I would say maybe read, write, understand, communicate.
Okay. All right. So that'd be something you'd want to know to determine whether or not they are Ruby on Rails literate, right?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else? Anything else you'd look for that? Just go ahead and unmute yourself if you want. So Ruby on Rails may be a rarity.
Someone who seeks first to be understood, then to first to understand, then to be understood.
Ah, yes, the great Stephen Covey, that quote. So here's where I'm going with this, guys. It's all about understanding what it is that you are interpreting, processing, that kind of thing. So when I say the word anger, to be emotionally literate would mean you know what typically anger means, right? So Jeff, when it comes to emotional literacy and the part that it plays in emotional intelligence, what are some thoughts that come to your mind as I'm going to move to another screen here in a minute to show a very powerful illustration?
One of the competencies that we're not talking about tonight is something called navigating emotions, which is how you get through emotions. You know, you have this going on and how am I going to get through it? And we always use an example. We always have a picture of a GPS, you know, whether it's in your car, on your phone, or an actual separate GPS unit. And the thing that emotional literacy plays in that is the first thing your GPS needs to know before it can help you is Where are you starting from? It can't plan the route. It can't do anything until the GPS knows where you are. And that's what emotional literacy is about. It's knowing where you are emotionally. And if you don't have that information, you really can't move ahead. And that's why emotional literacy is the first competency that we talk with people about when we're doing a debrief of an assessment or things like that. So it's the starting point of navigating what's going on. You know, we talk about the fight, flight, freeze, and then flock. It gives you that starting point. What am I going to do with this feeling? You know, where do I want to go with it? You know, where do my patterns take me normally? But it's the starting point.
Gotcha. So this illustration, I always butcher this gentleman's name. Maybe it's Plutchik's. Did I get that close, Jeff?
Plutchik, I've heard it both ways. Plutchik or Plutchik.
This particular emotion map illustrates not all, but a good number of emotions that we all encounter on a daily basis. The illustration is designed to show you intensity out to less intense, right?
Mhm.
Maybe you can go in the other direction. So, for example, over here to the right in the green, sort of at, I guess that'd be 3 o'clock, you can see it begins with apprehension and then can move to fear. And then when it's in its most intense, terror. So, Jeff, what do you think is the value of us learning, not maybe all of these that by memory and rote, but certainly to understand the meaning of and the messages behind emotions like they're illustrated on the wheel?
Well, I think the idea that emotions are connected in a way, you know, if you feel annoyed with someone, they're at 9 o'clock, okay, somebody, your office mate always burns the microwave popcorn. And does anybody like that smell? I don't know of anyone. So they do it once and they get annoyed, or you get annoyed. You might not say anything. You might just take it. Maybe if they do it twice, you think, oh, that's just an accident. It's just annoying. But then they do it every time. They do it. They put it on and they walk away, and you know, you've got that smell going through the whole office. So that annoyance can turn into anger. Okay. And that anger can cause you to say things that you don't want to say. It can cause you to just do things that you're not happy with. And if it continues and you don't resolve this problem, that anger, which started as annoyance, turns into anger, is now rage. And if you're feeling rage, you're probably not totally in control of your thoughts and actions. So that's where it can turn into something not good, maybe a physical confrontation, something like that. So it's important to understand how these emotions can grow if you don't do anything. Now, that doesn't mean they're all bad. You look there at 12 o'clock, you know, serenity. Okay, you're serene. You're content where you are. You examine that. Why am I feeling serene? Why am I feeling this calmness? And you discover what that is. And that can turn into the joy. You're just so happy and content with what it is. And then you start thinking about it and you realize this process is giving you a breakthrough. So you feel ecstatic about what you just discovered. So they're all there to help you. And this is a relatively simple chart of Plutchik's. You just Google it and you can find thousands of different ones. And I would recommend maybe, you know, finding one that you like and keeping it some way, you know, keep the file on your phone or something, so that, you know, if you're feeling fear, you can see where that's coming from.
Ah, I see it there. Can everybody see? He's got one. That's one of the varieties.
Ah, all right. I guess
well-
it's up to your professor if you get extra credit for that.
Yeah, we have one of those things we ask, that's kind of a family thing. We ask each other what our emotional scale is to kind of figure out
Nice.
how we are throughout the day so we can kind of help respond to each other. So we
Ah,
got this with one of our therapies it's called QNRT. It's a quantum neuro reset therapy. And they talk about these kind of things.
wow,
so
that's awesome. One of the things I was going to mention to you guys, and we'll make sure to get it before we end tonight, we do have an online interactive version of this that we'll share the link to with you. And it gives you the ability, you can click on an emotion, you can get the definition. There's some typical sensations, there's videos, there's some in-depth papers that you can look at. It's really, really powerful. So the idea here, again, is that the more literate we are with our emotions, the better we're going to be in our emotional intelligence and navigating things as we go forward. And I would dare say, and we're going to move into an exercise here in a little bit, that is going to illustrate, because, wouldn't it be great if we could just stop at the think and feel?
Eric,
Yep.
before you continue that, there was something I wanted to say. We're going to go back a little bit.
Okay.
About recognizing patterns. I don't think you need to go back to the slide.
All right.
If you get really good at recognizing patterns, you can use that as a force for evil. If that makes any sense.
Do you mean by that manipulation, Jeff?
It's another way of saying pushing buttons.
Ah, yes.
If you know that if I do this, this is going to get this person upset or derail them. So just be careful you're not using it that way.
Yeah, and that does come to another point too, Jeff. The idea that there are certain personality types that may push buttons, not because they're looking to harm, but it's part of their personality to do that. And the key thing is, and Jeff mentioned it early on in the session tonight, the object is not to change anyone. The object is to help us better respond when we're in an interaction with someone who may be pushing our buttons. That's the power. So in this think, feel, act exercise, I want to illustrate to you the importance of the behavior, the action that we take when we are in different situations. So I'm going to ask you to use your imagination. And the reason why is because the scenarios I'm going to read to you are not necessarily going to be a fit for your situation. So if I say you're a father that has a 22-year-old daughter in college, some of you may go, there's no way. Number one, I'm not a man. And number two, I don't have a daughter and I'm 30. That's okay. Just want you to work with me and imagine that you are. And I'm going to read these scenarios to you. And what I want you to do, and it'll probably be good for you if you have the ability to take some notes so that you can kind of get a good flow going here. And that is, what would you think after hearing my scenario? What emotion would you feel in that scenario? And then what would you more than likely do based on those two things? So it's the think. What do I think? What am I feeling? And then what would I do? And then we'll come back together here in a minute. I want to give you time to process as I read these off to you and give you some time to write that. All right, so the first scenario one. You are a father or a mother of a college-age girl who is in their junior year of college, doing very well. Over the holidays, your daughter comes home and announces that she's quitting college, she's moving 2,000 miles away, and she's going to become a painter. She's always wanted to do that, and she feels now is the opportunity. So what would you think if you were that parent? What emotion would you feel upon hearing that? And then what would you do? Would you scream? Would you be quiet? Would you cry? So I'll give you a little bit of time to kind of write those down. And that'll be scenario one. And then I'm going to give you one more.
Hello?
Yep.
Okay. Well,
Hold that
oh,
thought.
okay.
I'm gonna give you two, and then I'm gonna get your insights. I'm also, again, just use your imagination. What would you think? What emotion would you feel? And what would you do? All right. Next scenario. You go into your doctor for your annual physical, your wellness check. The doctor checks your vitals, blood pressure, heart rate, lung capacity, and then sends you to the lab to get blood work done. Normal, typical thing that you've experienced year after year. A day later, you get a call from the doctor's nurse saying that the doctor needs you to come in right away because of some of the things that were found in the blood work. What would you think? What emotion would you feel? And then what would you do? Would you call your spouse right away? Would you call your mom, your dad? Or maybe something else? So continue to think about that and jot down your notes. All right. So I didn't catch the name of the person that was starting to talk, but if you want to come back online and unmute yourself and take scenario one or scenario two.
I'll take scenario 2 or 1.
One, okay.
I understand, like, we've been taught that go to college, do all these things, and just listening to the scenario, me as a parent, I'd be bummed. I'd be really bummed, but sad, and I would cry. But that was one thing I always told myself. I would always want my children to be happy. And if that's something, it's be hard to support them, but if it's something that they love and makes them happy, then it'll take a while, but I may not feel that's the best decision, but I would rather see my child happy than be miserable in something that they don't want to do.
All right, great. Thank you for sharing that. All right, who else? Would you like to unmute and volunteer? Take scenario one or scenario two?
All right, well, for scenario 2, I did get diagnosed with cancer. And the first step, the mystery part, kind of identical to your scenario, is the what if. So I go in, I got a lump in my collarbone the size of a Twinkie, my lungs scanned, and I have a cloud in my chest the size of both of my hands. Now, it was a GP, so he just had basic equipment, but it looked like I had lung cancer, Breaking Bad style, and it was really bad. I ended up having lymphoma, but there's the shock factor. And then there's the actually finding out, which was a separate trip to the doctor. There was the, I know something's wrong, but I don't know what part. And then there was the finding out what's actually wrong, which is a completely different set of emotions.
Yeah.
The mystery of sorrow versus actual sorrow is way different.
Yes, very, very well said. And thank you for sharing that. And I would tell you guys, in February of 2020, I had that scenario, and it went on through multiple tests to where it was discovered that I had end-stage liver disease. I was in this 10 percentile group that they had no idea as to why it happened. And I'm bringing this up to you because I want you to understand that managing your emotions, emotional intelligence, is not necessarily going to solve anything, because I still have end-stage liver disease. But the reality of it is that by managing those areas that we're talking about, we can have greater peace, greater influence, greater optimism for those around us and for ourselves in the days that we have. And if we don't, we miss the time that is in front of us. And I will tell you guys without a doubt, the time you have in front of you now is the most important time of your life. All right, Jeff, I'm going to ask you to go to the chat before
right.
we move on.
Okay, for situation 1, I would want to know what is causing this desire, what changed in her life to cause this. I would listen to her. It's her life. However, I would explain the potential consequences of her action, not finishing school, maybe a lower paying career. But at the end of the day, you have to be supportive. Situation 2, I would feel panic and dread. I always assume the worst. I would also pray quite hard. I wouldn't tell anyone anything until I knew something for certain. I would not want to cause stress or anxiety for anyone else. And here's another one. I would support her decision and try to help her find creative and innovative ways for her to make a living following her dream.
Gotcha. All right. Well, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to move you back into my screen. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of your observations as it relates to what we just were talking about. So in that exercise, what was most eye-opening for you? And if you want to unmute yourself, you can just give a few words or thoughts. What was most eye-opening about that exercise?
I found that my initial reaction to the first question was not nearly as cynical or judgmental as I would have expected it to be. Growing up, there was always a very, very clearly defined path that I was expected to take with my education and my career. And this is the way that this is done because this is how this is done. And I have since learned that there are lots of other options out there and opportunities, and the world is a much bigger place than one would be led to believe. And just considering that question, I realized that what I thought would be my reaction was not at all the case, and that I would be very open to having that discussion with my daughter. She's 8 now, and this is a very likely scenario given her personality. So
that's awesome. Well, if nothing else, you are getting prepared.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Anyone else?
Eric, can I chime in?
Absolutely.
I'm dealing with a real life issue, not an issue, but this first scenario. My 3 grandchildren, 16 and 18 and 20, are a working punk rock band out in Texas. And I love how my daughter is handling it. She's letting them do what they want. They needed to, had to finish up their high school before they could do, and she's supporting them. Her and her husband are supporting them any way they can, and but aren't pushing them either. So I like how my daughter has handled it. Probably handled it better than I would have.
Nice.
And if you're interested, they're called psychotic tendencies with an SYK.
All right. So when you think about that process that you went through, How could it improve your relationships, personal and professional? If you could begin to pay attention, what you think, what you feel, and then the potential of what you would do, how could it improve? Again, feel free to type it in the chat if you like, or if you want to unmute yourself, we can go verbal. And this is a big one, by the way, because this is where the rubber hits the road, both personal and professional. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yep.
Well, for me, you know, how my insight was I met, you know, my current boss at a personal from family, you know, being a family friend, then coming into a professional world and looking at a different perspective, but also being able to have a insight or a say in like this where decisions are made has really improved skills for me. I don't know if how anyone else's, but I know for me it has helped in just you know, just building those relationships between, you know, my colleague and, you know, I have to always tell myself, well, he's a colleague at work and we're friends at, you know, we're friends after work or whatever, you know what I mean? But other than that, you know, things like, you know, just working, you know, working together side by side, you know, just having that communication.
Yeah. And what you guys are going to find, and probably already have found, a lot of times we kind of blast through this, whether it's because we're trying to finish projects, meet deadlines, whatever the case may be. We're not telling you that you need to pull yourself aside and meditate for an hour before you give an answer to a question. We're just talking about small changes of paying attention and gaining more understanding about what's going on inside of you. This one is one I'm going to leave for you to kind of just process on your own and take away tonight. Think about what challenges you in this regard. What could you do to maybe make it less of a challenge? What could you do to make it a part of your strength to be that more literate person with emotions? So as we come to a close tonight, one of my favorite quotes, and my hope is for you guys after the 2 sessions, and Jeff I know shares in this, is that you're going to find 1, maybe 2, who knows, maybe even 3 things that you could really get to working on. Something that could make a difference in your personal life as well as your professional life. And making it intentional. Because as the quote says, just because we know it doesn't make it enough. It's the action. That's the proof of it. As I know you guys all know, especially within the industry that you're in. I'm going to have Jeff type in the chat some information that will give you guys a bit of reference as you go forward. The information we're going to provide you with are some links to our website, which will include access to our podcast. These are not sales tools. Nobody's going to call you or email you and ask you to do something. It would just give you the ability to continue to build on your journey for emotional intelligence. The key here is we've given you just a taste. And we think that we've given you some things that are actionable right now, meaning you could start this now, start it tomorrow. But if you're wanting to go deeper, if you're wanting to learn more, that's why these resources are there for you. And we work with a lot of different type of organizations, long-term basis, to get them to where they need to go as teams, as in individuals. But these resources are designed for you to just take them and run. And certainly, You can also reach out to us directly at any point if you need clarity about anything that you've heard tonight, or anything that maybe it comes up to you tomorrow. You're thinking, oh, I forgot to ask about that. We definitely want you to feel free to do that. Jeff, I'm going to kick it over to you and Mahmoud to talk a little bit about the completion deal as it relates to their certificate and all that. And then Mahmoud, maybe if you have some closing thoughts as well.
Just that the website is spiritofeq.com. I put it in there, and just look for our YouTube and podcast pages just by searching for it. That's the best way to do it.
Actually, it's even easier. You'll see the, and I just thought of this, Jeff, you'll see the logos for YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and you can just click on them. They're typically right up underneath at the top right.
Okay.
And it'll take you right there. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, with the podcast, if you want to get a deeper understanding of our model of emotional intelligence, the first 8 or 10 of the podcast, we discussed all the competencies and things like that. And then we just have all different podcasts after that. And then I'll let Mahmoud talk about the quiz and the certificate.
All right. Well, I'd like to start with thanking you both, Eric and Jeff, for these amazing sessions. We enjoyed it very much as usual. Every year I invite you, I just keep listening to you and take notes and reflect on your thoughts. So thank you so much for all you've done to us. Thank you for my students who joined us today, and thank you for Mr. Talley. He's a colleague of mine in the department as well. And thank you for everyone for sharing your thoughts. And again, the whole point of this class and this session is to make a better version of yourself. And this is my hope. In order to validate your learning in this session, a few years ago when I invited Eric and Jeff, we said, okay, we need to not just only make it a session, a webinar. I wanted to even take it to a deeper level where you could have an actual certificate of EQ. And they both agreed to work with me on creating a quiz or an exam just to help you document your achievements. So you've done a great job today observing and sharing the thoughts. What I want to go by the end of this week, you will be asked to take an exam. And the quiz will be via D12. So Jeff will be sending me these questions based on the presentation that they shared with us here today, tonight and last night. And if you achieved 70% or above, you will get a certificate from the Spirit of EQ, signed by Eric and Jeff, that you attended an EQ session. And again, this is just to support your resume and support your professional development. So I will send you more details. I'm still waiting on the updated questions from Jeff. So I will be, it will take us a few days to put that quiz or exam on the D12. So wait for an email from me to let you know that the quiz is available for you. And Eric, I understand that you did mention that this recordings will be available in a week or so. And I would like to request, if it's possible, to have it sooner than that. I know there are a few students who did not attend due to work and personal reasons. So we need to make these recordings available for them so they could, view it on their own time and take the quiz. And we're on schedule, basically. This is a class and a syllabus, and there's a deadline for them to finish this activity by. So I would appreciate
I should be able to get that for you, and I'll probably no later than tomorrow afternoon. I'll make it a priority for you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yep.
All right. Well, that's all I have for you. Thank you again. Thank you for Mr. Talley. You have a question? Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to thank you for the gracious invitation on behalf of my students to be able to sit in and to witness this. As I've shared with them many times, they're in the people business. When they leave here, they'll be working and leading teams of others. And it's very, very important that they understand emotional intelligence and how to monitor their own selves, in addition to being able to understand the emotions that are being represented by the people they work with. So thank you very much. It was very, very valuable for me personally as well. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, yes.
Any questions or comment before we end the session? All right, well, thank you, Eric, and thank you, Jeff. We'll be in touch soon. And thank you for everyone.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Great holidays as well.
Take care.
Bye-bye.